My initial screen's up here, and I want to give thanks to both Cheryl Whiten, who provided a lot of the scenes of her beautiful flowers in her garden, and to Wizzy Brown, who's a Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service professional that deals a lot with insects and all those types of critters. So thank you to Cheryl and Wizzy. And we'll move on to Tarrant Regional Water District. This presentation is supported by a regional water supplier, Tarrant Regional Water District, as you can see by our map here. TRWD maintains 4 area lakes and pipelines needed to provide surface water to local water treatment plants so they can clean it to meet our drinking water standards for our communities. They also supply work with many cities in Tarrant County like Fort Worth, Arlington, Mansfield, and your city to provide water conservation programs to the community and other areas. So conservation is an important water supply strategy, and part of that, to providing for our 2.3 million people in Tarrant County, and that's expected to increase more than double over the next 50 years. And that's why TRWD supports programs like this one to help save water through outdoor watering and gardening education. At SaveTarrantWater.com, you too can sign up for those free weekly watering advice custom to your location. I get one even though I live here down here in Johnson County every week to check on things. If you're a resident of Tarrant County, you can sign up for that free sprinkler water system checkup, and a licensed irrigator comes to your home and provides a comprehensive evaluation of your system with recommendations to reduce water waste. There's also an event calendar where you'll find classes and workshops in the future. And TRWD also partners with organizations like Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service and our Tarrant County Master Gardeners to provide educational programs like this one. So be sure and check out both SaveTarrantWater.com and our website, tcmga.org, for future events. Okay. So why did I go after the title, Why the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly? If any of you guys are familiar with the spaghetti Western, back in the 60s, you'll remember Clint Eastwood and then the bad guy and the ugly guy working together and working in opposition multiple times throughout. And it makes it a little bit easier to remember. Companion planting. We have both the bad guys, and the guys who work apart from each other, the good guys, and those plants that work regarding nutrients with our soil. So again, most of the time we just go after right plant, right place. And how do you know what works for your location? Make sure you keep a record. This year, when I planted my tomatoes and peppers, I made sure to put in my basil and my marigolds, and I kept track. How did those two guys go in regards to attracting the pollinators and repelling the bad guys? I want to make sure I'm giving the good nutrition. And to give you an example, my tomato hornworms I found this year were nowhere near my tomato plants. They were clear across the other side of the 2 acres over there. So my marigold and basil did a good job this year. Okay. Throughout the process here, we're going to talk about different plant combinations in the companion planting. We'll have some plants that are symbiotic nitrogen fixers, like pole beans, for instance, those green beans up there. They bring nitrogen from the atmosphere into the soil. Okay. We'll talk about mutual climate cooperation, like marigolds and peppers, or corns and beans. We'll talk about trap cropping, and I have a lot of millets around my garden that help attract aphids out there and the predators out there and keep the bad guys away. We'll talk about southern giant curled mustard and its role in this area. We'll talk about pest suppression, marigolds and nasturtiums. Some days I can't say them right. And this year I learned something new about the voodoo lily. How many of you knew that they actually deter fungus gnats? I wish I'd known this year. I'd have planted some. And then we have all these plants that attract the beneficial insects that help pollinate our garden plants. Okay. And we have a lot of differences in height and colors and textures we're going to talk about as part of our garden planting. It all boils down to, in the end, that biodiversity you want to build into your garden so you don't have to use all those chemicals or other means of supporting, our garden or, repelling all the bad guys in there. Okay. And some of our plants like coriander, cilantro, thyme, fennel, and dill, they both repel and attract. So they do double duty for us. Okay. So let's go through what's a companion. A companion regarding people is like we see here on our screen from dictionary.com, literally means one who eats bread with another. Your friend, for example. While a companion has several meanings, including a person or animal you enjoy spending time with, for our purposes today, companion also means one of a pair of things that go together, that complement each other. What plants go together and what plants are adversaries, for instance. We'll give examples as we go along through here. I'm sure many of you have heard about the Three Sisters, and that's a good example of companion planting that's been around for decades, if not centuries. In history and in the ethnobotany book that I have, the Pueblo, the Mandan, and Iroquois tribes, for hundreds of years before we even came to this continent, were using the Three Sisters as a better nutrition in their tribes. Corn offers a pole beans support to climb. They act as a trellis, for pole beans, while pole beans pull nitrogen from the air and they bring it into the soil to benefit all three plants together. And when they decompose, the nutrients just go out even further. The bean stalks wind around the squash vines to seal light and bring some shade and protection around the area that they need. While squash sprawls out, and we've seen that in your garden probably, to create a living shade for the soil to keep it cool, moist, and prevent weeds. And they act as a mulch to eliminate weeds, so to speak. Not only does squash do that, but have you ever seen animals like a puppy or a raccoon or any other pest go up to a squash? That prickly surface kind of deters them and they back off, or at least my puppy does. So the Three Sisters represent sustainability, soil enhancement, and health, all of them, and they've worked for a long time in a cooperative environment. So why do plants need companions? So just as people benefit from that supportive, encouraging, and sharing companionship, so do plants. So in the following slides, we've got a list of many ways that companion plants work together to improve your garden. Along the way, we'll mention a few that don't play too well together, okay? And part of your handouts you'll receive when Nancy sends out a lot of the surveys and the recordings, you'll receive a couple of handouts from the University of Florida where they give you a good basic list of vegetables that are companion plants, as well as herbs that are companion plants for you and what all they do for you. So some of the benefits we'll talk again tonight about are nutrient providers. We gave one example with the beans, the pole beans. Natural pesticide plants, that actually exhibit or exclude whatever chemicals that are poisonous to different insects and things like that. Buffer zones. Some plants provide shelter protection. Pollinator attractors, the good guys. Biological control of pests, like tomato hornworms. Maskers, their scents may confuse the insects, so they don't stop and visit your garden, for instance. And we talked about trap crops, soil structure improvement. Have you ever had a side of a berm or side of your garden that just tends to fall apart, that doesn't hold together? You get some of these weeds that have really long roots to them, or some of the nice plants have really long roots to them, they actually can help hold it together. Not only do they hold it together, but they'll open up air pockets that are available for oxygen and for the other plants that you have in the garden to kind of send their roots down. We have weed reducers. We talked about one with the squash already. Generalist and then flavor enhancers. Some things just taste better with a companion plant that makes it grow better. So Cheryl gave me her list of must plant companions from her garden, some of which I share in mine. Basil, borage, alliums, dill, marigolds, millet, mustards, alyssum, nasturtiums, sunflowers and zinnias, and so many more. I did a tour of her garden a couple weeks ago, and she does have quite a bit more. When I was looking on the Almanac website today, I found this nice little picture of companion planting with herbs. And I'm sure a lot of you already know these, but basil. It helps out a lot with tomatoes and lettuce and peppers, as we just talked about. Rosemary pairs well with carrots and lavender, and thyme. Goes well with all kinds of vegetables as we're looking at it. And a lot of these, like thyme and oregano and parsley, are both attractors and deterrents. They do a dual role, the same herb does as we go through here. So basil is our beginning, okay? And it repels asparagus beetles, spider mites, carrot flies, thrips, cabbage worms, cabbage loopers, but it benefits a lot when grown with chamomile and chives and cilantro, garlic, and so many others. It helps them out. They grow together. Tomatoes, oregano, and parsley, again, helps them benefit well, but it doesn't play well in the sandbox with rue. Whether they're both going after the same nutrients or the same sunlight, they just don't grow well together. Okay. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard, as we're talking about basil, our first one, I'm going to mention a walnut tree. I mean, how many of you have tried to grow vegetables or certain plants underneath there and they just don't do well? They may be susceptible to the chemical walnut trees excrete juglone, Juglone. It kills plants, particularly in the nightshade family, like tomatoes, eggplants, peppers. These plants, when you try to grow them anywhere near that walnut tree or the roots, they start developing yellowing leaves, wilted foliage, stunted growth. They just don't do well, and ultimately they die. Well, other plants grow very nicely underneath there. Have you ever tried to grow onions or beans or even some ornamentals like forsythia? They may do really well underneath there because that chemical doesn't affect them the way it does others. So allelopathy, if you say it that way, is one of the ideas here that we're discussing with this example. Okay. Goldenrod and sunflowers sometimes do really well with some plants, for example, and yet not so well with others, as we'll talk about as we go through. And I love cinnamon basil. It's just really well to brush by that warm, spicy cinnamon effect and sweet herbaceous basil with hints of anise and mint in there. It's a very unique flavor due to a chemical compound, just an example of that's spicy and flagrant. So all by itself, it's a wealth of aroma through there. Borage does a great example at repelling tomato worms. So it would be good to put near your tomato plants or cabbage worms. It attracts the pollinators like bees, tiny wasps, and it grows really well alongside strawberries. There's almost everything that grows well along those guys. But it does well with basil and cabbage and tomatoes, like our slide shows. It's a pretty large plant, but it improves growth and flavor with an increase in minerals. So it helps provide nutrients to the soil too. So it almost hits on every part of the good, the bad, the ugly, if you think about it there. Alliums, there's onions, garlic, leeks, scallions, chives, shallots. They repair a number of aphids. Japanese beetles, not so good around those areas. So they grow well alongside the brassicas, the carrots, tomatoes, all these vegetables listed here. But they don't do well alongside beans or asparagus, peas or sage because they inhibit the growth. Okay, they compete for nutrients and water in the soil. So these are not the ones that you want to plant close to each other. And a funny story in regards to garlic. We took down some raised beds last year, the year before last, and my husband distributed the soil inside of it all over my yard. And all of a sudden I noticed what was growing right beside my exit gate. Garlic and onions that I've been growing in these raised beds, or all of a sudden the soil, I had evidently some leftovers in there. So I had all these little onions growing right beside my exit gate. So we pulled them up and enjoyed them. Okay. It's amazing, though, what grows out here in the country, what the pollinators give us. Dill is another one. It repels asparagus beetles. It attracts the good guys like ladybugs, predatory wasps that eat other insects. It attracts butterflies. And it grows quite well with asparagus, cucumbers, cilantro. But do not plant with carrots or caraway because they inhibit the growth by competing for resources. Another group that don't play well in the sandbox. Okay. Don't plant with tomatoes because it actually attracts tomato hornworms. I can tell you this year where we found tomato hornworms where they were attracted to my chase, my vitex trees. I mentioned on the other side of the property, They were all over those trees out there for some reason. Mhm. And dill actually grows quite well with chives, lemon balm, lemon thyme, and lavage. So a good plant to go over there. Marigold, one of my favorite plants. French marigolds in particular. They repel nematodes, Mexican bean beetles. They deter some of the predatory insects because of their strong scent. You know, but they grow really well with tomatoes, peppers, eggplants. We mentioned that before. But they're an example of that mutual climate cooperation between tomatoes and marigolds. Both benefit from growing together. The scent of the marigolds is what deters a lot of bugs away from eggplants and peppers. Okay. So, and this is what the open marigold looks like. Think about flower shapes. I want to mention this in here too. Tubulars attract butterflies, moths, and some bees, whereas flat-shaped flowers attract beetles and bees and flies and may serve as a resting place for a lot of our butterflies and moths. Umbels, the flat-topped clusters of tiny funnel-shaped flowers, they're really attractive to bees and flies, small butterflies, moss, things like that. While others, like funnel-shaped or whorl-shaped, those kind of bell-shaped flowers, they attract bees, flies, wasps, and beetles. So when you think about flowers, think about the end result and what insects, pollinators they may be attracting or repelling just by their shape and their color. Okay. Millet, Cheryl gave me a few millet plants last year that I planted on the outside of my garden. I don't want them inside my garden area. Why? Because they attract a lot of bugs, Florida leaf-footed bugs or those kind of things. And Cheryl gives a good example. I'll show you the picture on the next one. But plant about 15 or 20 foot away from tomatoes. Otherwise, those bugs that they're attracted over here will kind of go visiting the tomatoes, and you don't want that either. So they act as a trap crop. Okay. They also improve soil by adding organic matter to it as they decompose. Millets at work. Look at all the bugs that are attracting over here. I'd rather they be here than next to my other things like my peppers, tomatoes, my basil, all those other things. I'd rather they be visiting over here. So this is an example of trap cropping at its best. Promised I talked about mustard. Okay. It's almost called the green manure because of all the nutrient matter, the organic matter nutrients that add to the soil when they break down. But mustard attracts flea beetles and aphids. So hence they work at trap cropping. Okay. Ruby streaks of that Chinese mustard can pull heavy metals out of the soil in a process called phytoremediation. Hey, I did really good. I pronounced it this late at night. But one of the key things that most people don't know about the southern giant curled mustard in particular is it also produces a type of enzyme called homing endonuclease that can render a lot of pierce suckers sterile so they can't reproduce. It also attracts male insects to release pheromones that attract other kind of bugs. So they harvest or, they go hover around the mustard instead of out in the other parts of your garden. Okay. So it's a multifunctional kind of a plant. Alyssum creates a habitat for beneficials like parasitoid wasps and hoverflies. Love sweet alyssum. In a Florida study, African marigolds as well as sweet alyssum were planted with squash, which increased the number of natural enemies of aphids and had a positive impact on the yield with the squash. So we need a little bit more research to tell you the benefits of planting different companion plants out there. Nasturtiums, they repel things like cucumber beetles, whiteflies, squash bugs, all those baddies. And they grow really well with brassicas, radishes, tomatoes, and cucumbers. They kind of provide nutrients to them and a good job by repelling those insects too. Okay. And they do a lot of biochemical pest suppression. An example of one is on larvicidal effects on leaf miners. In other words, prevent them from growing and impacting the other plants going around. We mentioned sunflowers earlier. They're really good at attracting aphids, pollinators. They provide a lot of shade to some plants, which is beneficial. And they attract insect pests, trap croppers. So sunflowers are allelopathic. So plant them near other crops, but not in the same row, the bed, the container. So as we talked about earlier, allelopathy, that biological concept, is where one plant produces natural biochemicals that can have either a plus or a negative effect on other plants. We talked about the walnut tree being one of them, and we need to do more research, or you keep track of what works in that behalf in your garden. Okay? So again, different pictures, look at all the insects drawn to the marigold leaves. You can see them on their leaves, what happened through here, okay? So it does a great job at attracting through there. Zinnias, I had a number of these in my garden this year because they're great at what? Attracting pollinators, which we need to pollinate the other garden vegetables out there. So they deter pests like aphids and beetles with their colors. It's an example where colors have an impact on insects. And they attract predatory insects like ladybugs and hoverflies that are going to work on your behalf also in your garden. And here are some other examples through here. Look at the pretty pictures and how they open up. We were talking about umbels and the characteristics of different flavors of flowers through there. Okay. And then some more that coming through here that do a good job out there. Looking at sage, that's also a great one. As far as retracting and attracting and repelling different ones. All these have a different job for us today. Okay. Carrots. Didn't think about carrots as being a companion plant probably, but they do quite well with beans and lettuce and onions. They play well with peas and radishes and sage, tomatoes, but yet they don't play well with anise and dill and parsley, parsnip, because they compete with the same nutrients and they attract a similar pests, and they do a good job. Look at calendula. Most people don't think about this one as being a companion plant either, but they do good at deterring aphids. They grow well with brassicas, tomatoes, and beans, as the chart shows here, and they attract bees and butterflies, so hence your pollination increases. Okay, and they again release chemicals to deter some other pests through there. Cosmos, very pretty colors, and this is Cheryl's friend there. Attracts aphids. They plant with brassicas. They do a good job at attracting and improving the outcome, the taste of different nutrients through their different plants. Comfrey, besides being a very beautiful color, purple there, they improve the soil structure. Okay, chop and drop top fertilizer, nutrients, let them go back into the soil through there. You can also make a nutrient-rich liquid plant tree that'll benefit other plants for you. They work with weed, should be weed suppression because they block the sunlight. They attract pollinators, but beware, it can take over your garden. Okay, Cheryl was telling me she had to be really careful on how much hers grows because it'll take over. Chamomile is one of my favorite ones in tea. I have to tell you here, goes well with cabbage and onions, among other things. It has an antifungal property that can be made into a liquid plant food for fungal issues, similar to the reason why people drink it. Attracts pollinators, including ladybugs and wasps, does a very good job, as well as very colorful in your garden through there. Peas, a wide number of them. They trap nitrogen for the next crop. They improve soil fertility. They grow well with bush beans and pole beans and all kinds of other vegetables that we have listed through here. Whoops, forgot to turn it off. My spam callers have started again, so my apologies. I'll turn it silent here, okay? But peas don't grow well with onions and late potatoes or chives or garlic, but they do well with early potatoes. Okay, so they are companions for some and not so good for others. See there? Sorry about that. Radishes. I grow radishes almost every year. They're really good at attracting flea beetles. Daikon radishes loosen the soil due to the size. This is one of those examples, like weeds are good at improving aeration in the soil. Heaven knows our Blackland Prairie clay out here needs a lot of help with that. And they grow well with beets and bush beans and all kinds of melons and squashes and all kinds of things like that. But they don't play well in the sandbox of hyssop. They're competitive. So we need to watch out with that one. Sage. How many of you thought I'd actually talk about sage on this one? Really good at repelling cabbage moths. fly beetles, carrot rust flies through there. And they grow well with brassicas, strawberries, rosemary, and cactus, those kinds of things, but not so well with cucumbers. And again, in your garden, they may grow fine, but a lot of us may plant them too closely and they're too competitive through there. Okay. Cover crops, we're talking about another example of green manures. You know, nitrogen fixers, like legumes, we talked about the pole beans, or here's an example of red clover, white clover, crimson clover. You know, again, they give back to the soil, so that's always good. There was a great article by Lady Bird Johnson, Wildflower Center, that talks about ground covers and their role in enriching soil over the winter. That would be great for everybody to kind of take a look at, you know. Nutrient accumulators that provide deep roots draw minerals from the roots up to the soil, like comfrey, dandelion, borage, chicory, and sunflowers. And when they draw the minerals up to the roots of the soil, that benefits the plants that are around them in the garden. So they have the benefit of getting those nutrients that maybe their roots didn't reach down deep enough in the soil to kind of build up. Soil builders and more like buckwheat, mustard plant, stinging nettle, and daikon rashes. You know, their large roots break up the compacted clay soil. So you might want to consider planting those more as cover crops through the winter time. Okay. Grasses I didn't mention on the list here, but things like switchgrass and a lot of our native sedges add valuable organic matter when they decompose. So you don't only have cover crops to kind of break up underneath, you have cover crops that bring nutrients up to the top, and then you have others that contribute nutrients to the garden around there. And if nothing else, when they break down, they decompose in your compost, they add nitrogen that benefits the rest of the garden through there. So what does companion planting look like? It's not just a monoculture planting. It's rather a mix of texture and colors and scents and life and a true feast for the senses. You know, and as we get down to slides where Wizzy Brown contributed about all the hosts that we need for a multitude of insects and pollinators, we'll bring this back up again. But here are some examples from Cheryl's garden last year, or year before last in 23. She has a cucumber tunnel, and it has a lot of combination of plants with cosmos and marigolds and zinnias and basil and okra. They're planted adjacent to the tunnel. So they're contributing to each other, not only with shade protection or nutrients. Some repel plant insects and some attract the good guys. It's a combination of them. And here's a picture from the opposite end of the tunnel. You can see all the beauty of its growth and the attractors and beneficials through there. Here's a raised bed that she had that had colored bell peppers and friends. So you have interplanting of the French marigolds we talked about earlier, the basil, the sweet alyssum, garlic chives in there, as well as nasturtiums. Again, all these things growing. And again, one of her multiple cats kind of keeping watch over, making sure the insects don't come too close. Okay. Here we go with a green stalk planter. And this is something I invested in last year. I started growing a different variety of vegetables and herbs and just to see how they played well together in the sandbox, so to speak there. But nasturtiums, French marigold, Swiss chard, lettuce mix, I guarantee I didn't plant chard, basil, scallions, all kinds of variety, and they're growing together beneficially. And here you can see another of her garden as you've got all kinds of veggies growing together. This is the Vigo plant containers through here. Again, she's got multiple ones growing beneficially together through here. Here's a tomato bed where she's got the midget tomatoes going in there, basil, garlic chives, marigolds, straw flowers, all working together for a better harvest. Okay. This one, onion chives, tomatoes, marigolds, thyme. You see the combination of the different benefits going together? And here's another example where she had okra and black-eyed peas. And interspersed in there were zinnias and basil, cosmos, sunflowers. So again, different reasons for different plants growing well together. So another good viewpoint. I think she has something like 5 of the Vigo beds going together. And they even come in such a wide variety of colors. Not that we're publicizing those, there's different brands. But rosemary, thyme, lavender, kale, French marigolds, radishes, all these different things. Just to give an example to you, radishes, we'll pick that one out. Radishes grow well with things like basil, coriander, onions, spinach, tomatoes, but not so well with beans and kohlrabi. They don't play well together. There's such a list. You can find different lists with different companies, different extension agents, groups through there. I was in reading a Harris County Master Gardener newsletter. It's called The Urban Dirt from a few years ago, September of 2020. They were talking about how garlic and roses love each other. We don't have a shot of that through here. And then some of their examples they talked about with celery, you know, and it grows well with onion and cabbage families, tomatoes, bush beans. We talked about that one earlier. Another good example of the side of one of hers as we're going through here. Getting started, okay, as we go through here, planning your garden, keeping a record of what works in your garden, because you may have different soil. For instance, out here in Joshua, in my part of the country, the pH out here is 7.8. It has low nitrogen and it's lower than normal with phosphorus because I'm on the edge of a water levee through here. So we get a little bit more water table through here. So I get a little bit more water. And so I have to build berms to kind of divert water. So mine's going to be a little bit different than what you have in your yard. Keep records, celebrate successes, and know about compatibility. What may grow well but doesn't in your yard for a variety of reasons. Okay. And this is again, as you're looking at whether you're doing trees, flowers, and grasses, you know, look at the combinations to providing pollen, nectar, and host plants as we're looking at pollinators and insects and all kinds of birds through here, that grow throughout the season, not just during the summer, but that grow continually through the fall and even into the winter. Right now, I have a number of colors. Up until this cold front, I had rosemary blooming with light purple flowers. I had an apple tree that had pinkish red flowers on it. We still had some birds and visitors there on both of those. But again, plant clumps of some flowers, for maximum attractions, but not too many at one time. Do it, like we said, variety of colors and shapes to attract or actually repel certain insects through there. Okay. And when you get gifts or purchases from a box store or anywhere like that, make sure they're insect free before you put them in your garden. Okay. Check them more closely underneath the leaves to make sure you're not bringing in the wrong guys as you come through here. Okay. Host plants, Xerces, if you've never been on their website. This is not in my listing of resources, but they too are going to offer you suggestions on the types of plants to grow for different butterflies that you have, the moth species. Just to talk about butterflies, we're all cognizant or aware of monarch butterflies. We have 26 varieties of milkweed that grow just in the state of Texas alone. In North America here, there's close to 100 varieties of milkweed that grow. So know the type that grow in Tarrant County, you know, but yet may not grow in other parts of the state. Don't bring butterfly milkweed from other parts of the state and expect them to do well up here unless you've worked it out and researched it yet. So Xerces is a great source for you to look at the individual types of milkweed. The latest report they had out there was like 147 pages, but they went over very nicely different types of milkweed and where they grew in different parts of the state and what the benefits were to different organisms and butterfly, milkweed, monarchs, or different other insects and pollinators that you might benefit from. Okay. And don't forget just the pure effect of having the right plants for shelter throughout the year. So we're encouraging people to plant in layers by the mature height of it, not the when you first put them in there. Canopy trees, lower canopy, different types of shrubs. My sunflowers this year, different types of those kind of natives. I had some that were as tall as 12 feet, way up there, way taller than I am. A lot of the herbaceous plants, some of my I can't even think today. Asters and things like that. 3 feet, 5 foot, 6 feet. You look at that, and they provide a lot of shelter for different pollinators through there. And don't forget about leaving a little mess, especially this time of year, with logs and snags and twig bundles and leaves, because our pollinators and our insects and our other animals through here need a little bit of shelter throughout the year. Okay. And rocks and bare unmunched soil if you can. Okay. Handmade or artificial habitats, there's such a wide variety of those, and we have other educational in services that provide a lot of those. Should be sheltered and east to southeast facing. I have a large number of logs throughout our property, you know, that are just for those habitats for the critters through the wintertime, like right now. Don't go disturbing things. You might find a little slithering animal you might not want to visit with. But, those too have purposes throughout our garden. So before we close and talk about resources through here, some of the more unique items that I wanted to work with that are on your list of handouts you're going to be getting in the return emails are some of these compatible ones that go together through here, and we'll work with them. The University of Florida, I picked as our reference through here because of the opportunities that they share with us. Okay. So again, we talked about basil, we talked about cabbage families and carrots and corn and cucumbers, eggplants and those types of things. But did you know that lettuce itself, good companions for lettuce are carrots and garlic and onions and radishes. There's not too many things that don't grow well over there. Melons, potatoes and melons are bad companions, antagonistic, so to speak. Okay. Parsley grows well with so many things like tomatoes, asparagus, and others. Okay. Radishes, we talked about those guys. And strawberries don't go well with cabbages and tomatoes. Okay. A lot of your herbs, we didn't feature a lot today but there's a lot of them out there. Chervil, for instance, is a good companion for radish. Okay. Dill, we talked about. Fennel, most plants dislike fennel for a wide variety of reasons. Feverfew, roses do well. They love feverfew. That's one of the ones they do. And a pest repel that attracts aphids. So be careful where you put it close to. Does really good for that. Henbit is an insect repellent. Okay, so it does really good through there. Lavender, it kind of deters moths from coming to visit. So mint works on repelling cabbage moths, aphids, different types of beetles. So on the companion listing that you get on herbs that you get, you might want to take a look around, and maybe some of your favorite herbs either are the good companions for certain things by providing shade or nutrition, or they may repel certain pests that you want to get rid of. If you have an issue with bean beetles, you might want to plant some summer savory through your bean, types of plants so they come visit, those kind of things. And just remember, where there's a good guy, there's always a bad guy. So be careful with what you attract and repel. Okay. So some of the resources we have, I used a lot of Jessica Walter's book, Plant Partners. Okay. There's a good one on companion planting by Nine and McKinnon. There's Green Roots on Fruits and Veggies 101, Vegetable Companion Planting. There's a lot of good guys through here. On the websites, I probably went a little bit extensive, but don't forget that another Texas gardener down here wrote this great one on companion planting guide for us. Allelopathy, if you want some more information on it, this website from AgriLife Today does a great job at improving that one. It talks about improving tomato plants through companion planting. Okay, there's a couple on this one through here. Okay, this one again is on companion planting. This is like unwanted guests. This is a podcast that Wizzy Brown does. Bugs by the Yard and Unwanted Guests. It'll be educational to listen to Wizzy. She's a great speaker on her different podcasts. Okay? This reminds us again about the University of Florida coming up. Some other YouTube channels or websites that Cheryl likes to recommend is Growing a Greener World. Joe Lample does a great job with that one. I've watched him for a number of years. Central Texas Gardener has a lot too on there. Epic Gardening. Old World Garden Farms. There's a lot of good recommendations through here. As we're finishing up on the rest of this, want to remind you that quality in equals quality out. And what does that mean is be careful with your seed sources, okay? Know the people that give you seeds, like out of their garden. Okay, have you been there and are you comfortable with what they're producing? Again, botanical interest is a great one. I've used those a lot. All these are great. Native American seeds, typo, sorry about that. Johnny Select Seeds, Seed Savers Exchange, United Seeds is a good one. Baker Creek, there's a wide variety of these. Again, quality products. Okay. Pick some of those that are Texas natives would be great too. Again, one more time on Wizzy Brown and her podcast on pests and insects, the good guys, the bad guys. Again, a couple of good podcast websites for you. And one more slide to advertise for us. Tarrant County Master Gardeners. Our help desk is manned. You'll get real people. When you call in, a lot of times it may send you to a recording because we're on the other line. And then the recording takes the information, we'll get back to you. So Tarrant MG at ag.tamu.edu. Okay. On the weekends, we have people that answer from home or different holidays. We're there. If you have something personal you want to send or ask me about something, Nurse Teach 2020, you can reach me at gmail.com and I will respond. I typically get 5 or 10 emails personally after each presentation. So I'm going to leave these up. Okay? And we'll go to Q&A if we have anything out there. Like I did mention, which has a great article or short little booklet called Companion Planting Guide, is actually by the KelloggGarden.com. They do a great job at talking about planting zones. And it is Kellogg, KELLOGG, garden.com. Just like our Kellogg, they used to do a lot of cereals for us. But they go through too and talk about different plants in particular and give you suggestions on the type of companions to grow with them. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned those guys too.
All right, Teresa, here we go.
All
The uh,
right, let's see what
the
we
the,
know and what
cor-
we don't know.
the corral has been opened.
Yeah.
Um, First question. Every year I get squash borers on my zucchini vines. Is there
Yeah.
any companion plants that will repel them?
I'm looking to see about squash spores in particular. You know, I'm thinking about those. Ugh. That's a new one for me. I haven't seen squash spores because I don't grow squash very often through here. How about the rest of our support staff up there? Because I've not dealt with squash spores. How about you guys?
The companion plant that will repel them. You don't think the marigolds would step in here?
They quite possibly be because a lot of times they're with the beetle borers and things like that through there. So marigolds quite well. Um, might do a great job through there. That's a good suggestion, Jim. Because a lot of
Yeah.
our experience when you're talking about pot marigold, that's one that just came to mind. Does with beetles, um, especially asparagus insects that attack over there, tomato worms. So the pot marigold in particular may be one that might help you with that one.
Okay. Mr.
Tans
Wesley, hope that
Tansies are
answers.
the other one. I told you if you just give my senior mind a minute here, tansies are another one that are known to help out with squash bugs. They also work with cucumber beetles in particular.
Pansies?
Yeah.
Okay. Lovely. Anne said, great presentation. Thank you.
Mhm.
Susan asked, can you show the slide with the book listings again?
Okay. The book listings. Yes. Hang on. There we go. I'll keep that up for a little bit.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you.
Mhm.
Nancy says, hey, great job. Lots of info. Oh, yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well,
Um, Dick, thank you very much.
Mhm.
Linda asks, are there plants that deter snails?
Mhm. Yeah.
Oh, that's a tough one.
I have a puppy that does a great job at that. He just
I
picks them
can
up
think.
and takes them around the yard, but I don't think that's what you want. Looking for snails. I've got one that Sage does with slugs. That's pretty close, but I don't have one in particular that I can think about that does snails. Uh, let's see. I'm looking on my little
Thinking
list
of,
here.
I'm thinking of a ground cover. It's got to be kind of low to the ground.
Yeah. There's a lot of those types. Even like squash is kind of low, but they take over the ground cover pretty well. But I don't have anything that does slugs. I mean snails,
Snails,
slugs,
snails.
snails. I don't have any particular recommendations on that one. That would be one that if you send me an email or reminder, I'll look it up and I'll give you back some an answer from
Okay,
Texas A&M's website.
excellent. Lena, hope you caught that. Let's see here. Next question. Is it possible to put a companion plant in a large container that can be moved around the garden to work a few areas as needed?
That's what I do with my millet. I do those, they're trap cropping and I move them around.
Hmm.
Your marigold might be one, even basil, you can move those two around if you have a significant depth on them. Because again,
Hmm.
remember, a lot of these guys that do a great job, it's because, I mean, they grow good roots on there too. So I don't see any reason why not on that one. That's a good suggestion. Mhm.
All righty. Uh, Ms. Oliver, this is not a question, but Dunja, I know I botched that up. Dunja, zucchini is self-pollinating. It can potentially help with the vine borer issue. I have not
Oh,
grown it
okay.
yet, but it can remain covered. That's Dunja, zucchini
Hmm.
is self-pollinating.
Hmm.
Can potentially help with the vine borer issue.
Okay, that's a good one. Yeah. And that's what's nice about having feedback because as master gardeners know, we're always learning. And there are a lot of vegetables that I don't eat yet, so I'm not so prone to plant them and see how they work. There's only so many articles you can read that gives you book knowledge, but it's the hands-on when you play in the dirt with these guys. So that really gives you the experience that you need. Mhm. That came up on the help desk recently was they've got all kinds of critters that come across into their yard, and they wanted to know what kind of plant would kind of deter certain small critters. I don't know if they're talking about possums or raccoons, but one of the ones I came up when I was looking up this on the help desk the other day was wormwood. I haven't used it personally, so I can't tell you that it actually works, but it's a recommendation.
Would you please repeat the Kellogg
Yeah.
website information?
Yep. I don't mind at all. It's
Edith Ward raised her hand. I'm going to allow her to talk. So,
Okay.
so Edith, if you're there,
Hi, I find that with the squash, if you keep it covered until after the blossoms come on, it tends to defer the squash borers.
Yay. Thank you.
So, Edith, say that one more time.
If you keep it covered like like those claws and stuff, because they're attracted by the smell.
Right.
So if you keep it covered until the blossoms start coming on, then it kind of defers the squash bug.
Okay. Once before about weeds and the importance of, not all weeds are bad weeds. Okay.
Right.
Dandelion does a great job on deferring different things too, but it's not one that you think about as being a good thing in your yard, unless your great granddaughter just loves it. You have to explain to her why you cut it down.
And,
Those kind of things. But yeah.
and dandelions are great because they end up in a wine bottle.
Or you can eat them. A lot of
Right.
pioneers ate them. My granny
Yep.
used to cook that stuff all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
You have to,
Yeah.
you have to, you have to, I'll just say this, you got to pick a lot of dandelions to make a bottle of wine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, let's see. I got one more. Um, is this a comment? Wormwood
Mm-hmm.
is another name for a type of,
Artemisia.
thank you. Thank you, Doc.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm from Virginia. Those kind of words get kind of messy. Did you say henbed, which is the weed, deters pest? And if so, which pest?
Yeah, they just, when I was looking it up, they didn't give me a list. It just said insect repellent. Here's one that's unusual. Pennyroyal, Pennyroyal. I have not grown it. Supposedly roses love them, but what's unique about pennyroyal is what they repel. Flies, mosquitoes, fleas. More books that
Here
I
we
want to
go.
promote before we end up, Tim, is the book that we mentioned on the front page there from Brian Lowell. One of the nice things that I liked about his book, since we had several books on our list here, is toward the back of it, he gives suggestions. For instance, like if you're growing beets, and he tells you the reasons why he makes those suggestions. He says with beets or Beta vulgaris, he says really good when you're growing radishes and lettuce and onions and carrots around them because the common beet pests, which are aphids, flea beetles, red spider mites, and cutworms, those good companion plants manage those pests. Beets grow well with other root crops, those kind of things, spacing. But again, he gives you the rationale why he makes recommendations of grow marigolds around beans because of this, or grow so-and-so peppers, grow oregano around peppers because of this.
Theresa, thank you very much for another fine presentation.